good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for still being here, and thanks to Giant for the opportunity to talk. What I'm going to talk about isn't what's on the display board. I'll talk about that tomorrow, actually. It was said healing at home. But I'm going to present some general ideas which I think echo a common theme. So what we're talking about here is clinical trials that can happen anywhere. And you'll see we're on a stand just out there, and we have a forest because it's open, because the people who are participating in these clinical trials, or indeed patients, can be anywhere, provided they're connected. And this is what we're about, that every patient is connected and every patient is safe as a result of that. Not that everyone in the clinical trial is a patient, but that is the intention of the clinical trial. So what we have is a system that we call the patient status engine. So it's an engine. What is an engine? Well, we have engines. We have steam engines. We have internal combustion engines. We have difference engines, going back a little bit. We have search engines. So an engine is something that takes inputs, works on them, does work, and produces an output. So what this engine is a complete end-to-end, multi-variable, multi-vital sign patient monitoring system. So it takes continuous data from heart rate, respiration rate, temperature, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, other information can be added either manually or if it can be instrumented, can go in, presents it locally, and also presents it back in the cloud. I'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow, or you can just see it in operation at the, just across the corridor there. So what is really interesting about this system is that, first of all, a lot of people talk about these multiple data collection systems. Very few of them actually exist. So I've been doing this for nearly 20 years, putting wireless sensors onto people, onto patients, and it still isn't standard care anywhere in the world, right? Fortunately, due to the efforts of some of the big tech companies, wearables have become kind of common. People know what they are. But back in 2008, 2009, when in a former company, we had a wearable cardiac patch in a trial in a hospital in London, nobody had any idea what was going on. So this isn't new, but what is new now, from our point of view, is that there is a market demand. People have suddenly woken up to this. So one of the reasons that this system works so well is that from here, where we have patients, and there can be hundreds of patients because this is fully scalable, through a local device where we don't actually use an app dropped onto a handheld personal device because that cannot be fully controlled, through a Wi-Fi connection, if this is in the hospital, into a back-end system with here an API for direct integration into the hospital or the patient electronic medical record system. Around here, within this dotted line, all of that whole thing, end-to-end, is a single Class 2A medical device. So we've had to go through a process of making sure that data here, input data, we can guarantee the quality and the completeness of the data there. I have never seen that done on any system which is a plug-and-play collection of components, rather than what this is, which is a single, coherent system design which takes account of two very important things. Here is a wireless connection. Here is a wireless connection. Anybody here who's done any playing around with these systems will know that a wireless connection will always fail to carry data some of the time. That might be 10 milliseconds, or it might be 10 minutes. If it's 10 milliseconds, you wouldn't notice. But a half a day later, this system would have fallen apart. Unless you compensate for that, unless you see this as a system. So this is what we've done. This is what we've developed. So here it is in a configuration which can be used in a hospital. So we're talking about digital pharmaceuticals and technology today. Let's look at this slightly differently. What's now becoming interesting, post-pandemic, and we were telling the world about this 10 years ago, but let's not worry about that. But now everybody's caught up. This can be used anywhere. These patients can be at home. The quality and completeness of this data and the resolution, if you like, is equivalent to that you get if you are being continuously monitored in a high-dependency bed, in a high-dependency ward in a hospital. Almost ICU grade. And it can be in the ambulance. It can be at home. Importantly, as far as the system is concerned, the users are concerned, nothing changes except the wireless connectivity. So we just drop a SIM card into this device. The data still goes back to the central place. It's still accessible in the same way, and it can be viewed. So once you start seeing this as a system which allows patients, in this case, to be anywhere on that journey, then where else is a system like this going to be extremely useful? So this is where we are at the moment. We're doing a lot of virtual ward work because this is a virtual ward that allows high acuity care to be delivered outside the hospital. So what we are really doing, yes, we're monitoring patients remotely. Yes, we're providing real-time and predictive analytics. But more importantly, and the way to think about this, we actually connect patients or people, patients, to the digital fabric. So there's people sitting in this room, and if you're wearing a set of these monitors, it's allowing the system to look inside you, to look at your physiology, to create a data-rich physiological image of what you look like, which is entirely unique in each case. And so being able to do that, a lot of other things then flow from that. One of the first things is that it's all about the data. Absolutely all about the data. So if you can measure, and if you can measure with good resolution and accuracy, you can model. If you can make a model, you can predict. If you can make a prediction, you can give that information to, in this case, a care team, a clinician, and they can do something about it. So here we go. The interesting thing is, and we've been hearing a little bit about AI and so on, if this data is good, this model can be relatively simple. You're not burning up 85% of your computing power trying to extract from a whole lot of messy data some homogeneous information that you can then build the model on. So that's why we say we generate the data. We overcome the garbage in, garbage out effect. And then look what's happening here. So who are the engineers in the audience? Any engineers? So what we have here, inputs, actions, predictive outputs. This is the engine. But actually in engineering terms, what this is called, it's a really old idea. It's called a control loop with negative feedback. In other words, when something's going out of range, you feed back a little bit of that output and you pull it back down again. And I can see at least one doctor in the audience, and I'm sure he would agree that this is exactly what you're doing if you're working especially in intensive care. You're controlling that patient. You're stabilizing that patient. The clue's in the word. So this is what this is all about. So we're talking about clinical trials. So how are we going to apply this? And what are some of the really important things to think about? Let's change tack a little bit. So, here is the clock, which is stopped. So here's the thing. This clock is probably the most accurate clock in the universe, not even on the planet, in the universe. How come? How come it's the most accurate clock? So it's an old joke, actually, but it's still a good one. Excuse me. It's accurate twice a day. Absolutely accurate. But it's bloody useless, isn't it? It doesn't do anything. So something that has no dynamism isn't very useful, even though it can be absolutely accurate. So, what are these numbers? Yeah, temperature. Yeah, human body temperature. Absolutely right. Fahrenheit and centigrade degrees, Celsius degrees. What are these numbers? Blood pressure. Good one. Yeah, great. And these numbers? Standard pulse. Excellent. Now, here's the question. Are these numbers right or wrong? But everybody knows they're right. Everybody knows they're right. And so many things are based on the fact that they are right, particularly temperature. But it depends. The first thing it depends on is time of day. Is that significant? Absolutely. Absolutely significant. Because look at the variability there. Average person, your body temperature wanders by about 2 degrees Celsius over a day. So that's quite a lot. So if you, and this is an average adult, by the way, a child's temperature can be much greater than that in terms of its variability. So if you measure your child's temperature up here, and they're running, a little hot, but they're okay, suddenly they're febrile, and you're filling them full of Calpol, and maybe all you needed to do was wait half an hour, and it'd come back down again. But this is critical when you start giving drugs to people or making clinical decisions. So, temperature, what else? Age also modulates temperature. So, I may or may not be one of the older people in the hall, but I'm probably up here. The variability in my temperature is shrinking on a circadian basis. So, younger people have a larger variation. So you've got to take this into account. And also where you measure temperature. And anybody being involved in this area knows that it's really damn difficult. You think it's easy to get temperature off the body. It's not. So here are 3 points, standard clinical points where temperature is measured, but they're different. And this is also interesting. This is the result of exercise, where you are in terms of how your body, how much energy you're using, also varies that. So we start seeing it's not quite precise. And of course this. In females of, between certain ages, this is normal. But look at this. Huge and very sudden temperature spike. But from here, 36.6 to a little more up there. So it goes from 36.6 to about 37.5, and so it's less than 1 degree. But we've already seen that the variation on the circadian basis is 2 degrees or more. So that's one of the reasons why so many of the methods that have been used either for fertility or for contraception, just measuring female body temperature, have been problematic. It's a really difficult thing to spot. So measuring these kinds of parameters is really, really difficult. So where do we go from here? Well, I have other slides very quickly. I was going to run through them that show, in fact, that every signature, every physiological signature in the body changes with a circadian rhythm, including biochemical markers. So they're continually changing all the time. So what then does that mean when it comes to measuring these? What is really important here? Are we looking for high precision or not? So are we going to get back on? Are we?
The projector's died.
Oh.
Sorry.
Surely that deserves a round of applause, the killer projector. All right, let me just talk through it. So it turns out that really what is very, very important when it comes to human physiology is not precision, but continuity. You really want to be able to measure something continuously over a period of time. And that really is the key to this, because in human physiology, or any kind of animal physiology, whoa, we're back. In any kind of physiology, then it's very, very personal and not necessarily very precise. So this is just an example of where taking precise measurements may give you a totally incorrect view of what is going on. So here is the safe zone. 2 spot measurements at certain time apart, everything's fine. But actually, if you're looking more closely, you can see that it's not. There's been a big spike. And from that spike, there's a fall off. So if that was a blood glucose level, that's really bad. And here, if you take, this is just heart rate, pulse, 65 beats a second, 2 subjects. And then here's what happens if you look more closely. Measure every heartbeat, plot it out, and here is the instantaneous heart rate. So we have these 2 subjects. So we have the top subject, and look how all over the shop that is. And then we have this subject here. Yeah, nice regular pattern. Remember, we're looking at every heartbeat, so this is down here. So if you were asked which is the most healthy of those people, which one would you say? A or B? In fact, this is the healthy state. This is the healthy state. And this subject has sleep apnea. This is the response to kind of accentuated breathing like that from the heart. So these kind of regular patterns can often be pathological, not healthy. And so this is the whole thing here, that when it comes to human physiology, there's nothing very precise about it, but there is something hugely personal about it, right? This idea of the dynamic physiological model, your digital twin, look how it runs from the genome, sequencing the genome. How many billions, hundreds of billions have been spent on doing that, looking at our blueprints. But our blueprints really don't fully predict what happens up here. This is something entirely different. This is the result of a whole lot of other factors, including the way you live, your age, and everything else. So really, that's the sort of key to the message I want to give, that when it comes to this, we have taken our patient status engine, and from a small but quite far-sighted clinical research organization, recognizing that that platform was fully CE marked, was FDA cleared, was able to be, the data therefore was clinically viable and clinically reliable, said, let's take this platform and let's start to see what else is needed in that to turn this into a system which is absolutely ideal for clinical trials, particularly decentralized clinical trials. So that's what we're doing. For a start, connected into data trials, into the back end. We've done that. Secondly, what other features would be in that platform which would make it desirable for use by patients undergoing clinical trials? Well, here's a few things. Firstly, yeah, all the vital sign data, but how much of that is that subject in the trial really interested in? So let's screen a lot of that. Not what you'd see over there, which is a kind of clinical view. Let's screen a lot of that. But what else do they want to know? Well, they'll want to talk, they'll maybe want to talk to the trial organizers. So messaging, put a messaging app in there, but not a different app. Put it in secure co-location with the overall system. Video, again, integrate Zoom, we did that, but when we came to Europe, well, when we offered it to some of our European customers, they were like, no. So not using Zoom, put in a co-located, secure video backend running within this platform. So video, so you can make a call. The other thing then, information. Let me go back. So this is the current view, but that isn't what the patients are looking for. So here are the things. So some summary information of what's from the sensors. Little bit of status information down here, because it's always useful to provide a little bit of this so that if something goes wrong, you can ask a patient or the person in the trial to say what they see here. But then messages, open a message, request a video call, just click it off the same tablet screen. Information about the next appointment. A lot of the people who are undergoing advanced techniques, such as CAR T-cell therapies and related cancer treatments, they need to be in the hospital frequently. So not so frequently if more of this monitoring can be done at home, but occasionally they need to go. So more information there. So if you have to be in the hospital that day, what else do you want? Well, you press this and you get the Uber button. Just press the Uber button, it's connected to that, and Uber Health will turn up and collect you. This is interesting, study information. It turns out that many people who are undergoing clinical trials have no idea about what stage the trial is at, what else is going on, and what all this technology is doing. Information, it's there. So their own informed consent, what is that about? And also study progress. For people who want it from that, go through and you can actually start getting reference papers on what is happening in the study itself. So this isn't fully released because this is engineering work, and I have to say that once you're in the realm of regulated medical devices, what you can do in 2 months of solid engineering and development work takes about 6 months to get through the subsequent regulatory processes, but it's on the way. And so that is what the patient is seeing. The back end still looks something like this because this is the dashboard. Here is information in this case. This is the patient's vitals information from which you can get patient charts. You can see what is happening. So this screen then is part of a larger screen that the trial organizers have access to, which is giving them the ability to respond to the video calls, make the video calls, and so on. So I think without having a big final slide, I think it's probably a good space or a good time to leave it. But takeaway messages, if you really want to know what is happening, don't try to measure something super accurately once a week. It doesn't mean anything very much. You need to have continuous data. And that data doesn't always need to be that good. And that's why even in our view, the relatively poor data from a Fitbit or an Apple Watch is useful in this context because it's continuous. It gives a kind of indication. And this is really about collecting data, because from that, the good data allows good predictions to be made. And those good predictions become really related to personalized health. And if we're looking at personalized medicine or developing personalized drugs, we need to absolutely measure personalized responses. And of course, within the way drug developments or drug regulatory processes work, it's very, very hard to give regulatory approval to a drug that only works on one person. But if that's what it's designed to do, and you can measure that, then you have a point of being able to break through that conundrum. So that's all. Thanks very much for listening, for putting up with the fact that some of the time there was only a blank screen.